Look to the skies, America. There she is, the heavy-hitting hammer of the 8th Air Force, the Consolidated B-24 Liberator. While the Fortress holds the line, the Liberator expands the front. You are looking at a marvel of modern engineering that has turned the tide of battle from the Channel coast to the heart of the Reich. Note the high-mounted wing, the famous Davis design. It's thin, it's long, and it slices through the air with an efficiency that allows this bird to carry a heavier payload faster and farther than any other heavy bomber in our arsenal. See those bomb bay doors? They don't swing open like barn doors, dragging in the wind. They roll up into the fuselage like a garage shutter, keeping our speed high right up to the moment of delivery. And delivery is what this ship is all about. Thanks to the wizards at Willow Run, American industry is pumping out one of these four-engine giants every single hour. It is the sheer weight of numbers, combined with advanced tricycle landing gear and a 10-man crew of the finest boys from back home, that is dismantling the enemy war machine brick by brick. This is the Liberator, the long arm of liberty reaching across the Atlantic.
Ploesti, outstanding achievement among great air battles, startled the world. The Romanian target, rich in oil and source of 20% of the life's blood of Hitler's Wehrmacht, was assigned to the 2nd Division before the unit was a year old. For weeks, under the fierce African sun and a wind that scored engines with fine grains of sand, the Liberator crews had worked to perfect the details of this mammoth task. On August 1st, 1943, 5 groups of B-24s were over Ploesti. They go through an inferno. Scudding above the trees, Liberators attack at a height little more than the oil refinery smokestacks. At point-blank range, they meet a deadly fire from small arms to large-caliber anti-aircraft guns. Right through the dense smoke and flames roar the bombers, their delayed-action bombs scoring one after another. The cost is high, but the mission, vitally important to Allied strategy, is accomplished in a paralyzing blow dealt the enemy. Ploesti provided the Germans with more than 1/5 of the oil needed to keep their war machine going full speed. This raid was one of the heaviest individual blows delivered against the contracting ring of steel around Hitler's empire. Every man who took part in that mission qualified as a hero. Awards recognized that, as Ploesti bred 4 men for the nation's highest decoration, the Congressional Medal of Honor. They were Colonel Leon W. Johnson of Moline, Kansas, Lieutenant Colonel Addison E. Baker of Akron, Ohio, Major John L. Jerstad of Racine, Wisconsin, and Second Lieutenant Lloyd H. Hughes of Corpus Christi, Texas. Hughes' courage was typical of all the men who flew that day. Flying in the last formation into the target, Hughes' plane was hit by flak. Gasoline streamed back over the wing and fuselage. Disregarding the long grassy plain beneath him, Hughes chose to continue on over the target rather than make a forced landing. Flying through the leaping columns of flames, the gasoline-soaked bomber dropped its explosives and emerged blazing. The pilot then attempted to land. Too late, the aircraft in inferno plunged to the ground. 3 of the awards of the Congressional Medal were posthumous. The 4th was presented to Colonel Johnson, later commanding general of the 14th Combat Wing, when the Liberators returned to England. Standing in front of his men and aircraft, the colonel was decorated by Lieutenant General Devers, then commanding the European Theater of Operation. While Ploesti was in the making, more and more Liberators were taking the long hop from the United States to bases in England, where they arrived at stations in the flat green countryside of East Anglia. Boomerang, pioneer with these first Liberators over Europe, a veteran of Africa, the Middle East, and Great Britain, was the first B-24 Liberator to complete 53 missions in the European Theater of Operations. After its 53rd flight, the battered bomber, which was almost scrapped after its first mission because of flak damage, went back to the States to tell how the Libs were helping to win the victory of the air. Everyone came to Boomerang's going-away party. There's the 2nd Division's former commanding general, General James P. Hodges, with group and wing commanders. Shaking hands with the pilot, the general and his staff, and the maintenance and combat crews pay homage to this bomber. Boomerang was never a plane to pick easy missions. Flying solo over Ploesti, she came back with corn stalks clinging to the bomb bay doors. Almost ready to go, Boomerang is covered nose to tail with names and messages of goodwill from its old friends and greetings to ground crews at air bases in the States. Now the engines turn over. The familiar Takeoff roar is heard for the last time in England as the plane taxis down the runway. Boomerang is headed home. Her wheels lift from the ground as she quickly gains altitude. Does a 360 for one last goodbye, giving the base an airman's farewell before sweeping off into the west, homeward bound. An announcement in October of 1942 tells the Liberator men they are now the 2nd Bombardment Wing, early predecessor of the 2nd Air Division. The announcement had hardly been made when the major part of the 93rd was ordered to Africa on what was to be a detached service for 10 days. Before they returned again to England, however, what came to be known as the first African expedition had lengthened the 10 days to 3 months. From desert bases, they bombed Desert Fox Rommel's retreating army and attacked Naples and airdromes in Sicily to help in defeating the enemy in Africa, the first major victory for the Allies in the European theater. The Liberators that had been left behind in England had not been inactive during that period. With the submarine menace threatening to cut the vital Atlantic lifelines, bombing of sub-buildings and repairing facilities was a top priority on the 8th Air Force's list. Time after time, the Libs went to Brest, Lorient, to La Police and Saint-Nazaire to hit the undersea boats in their lairs. January 1943, and the first American bombing of Germany itself, with the Libs in forts leaving the great U-boat yards at Wilhelmshaven ablaze despite 50 Jerry fighters and plenty of flak. Over the continent waits the Luftwaffe, deadly opponents in a sky still strange to friendly fighters. The crack units of the German Air Force, including the Abbeville Kids, JG-26, that expert group of Jerry fighter pilots are always up and ready to intercept the bombers, daring to fly unescorted over Nazi-held Europe. With replacements of aircraft and crews coming in a thin trickle, losses to the then few Liberators were a devastating blow. Only the courage and determination of the combat crews and the hard work and long hours of the ground personnel kept the tiny force going until the acceptance of daylight precision bombing at the Casablanca Conference started replacements coming in an ever-increasing stream. Vegasoc, Antwerp, Brest, and other continental ports feel the weight of Allied bombs as the Liberators and fortresses bore through the enemy defense. Spring of 1943, and Kiel shipbuilding yards were the target. In a 6-hour flight, the 44th Group took part with the Flying Forts in one of the biggest and most vicious battles in the history of the 8th Air Force. Carrying the first incendiaries to be hauled in a bombing attack by this Air Force, the Libs were forced to continue their bombing run past the dropping point for the forts because of the nature of their load. During this extended bomb run, 120 enemy fighters, both single and twin-engine, stabbed at the Libs from every quarter. The Liberator crews were aware of the great importance of these sub-producing yards, and despite one after another of their numbers exploding or slipping away, fought their way through and showered their 100 and 500-pound clusters of incendiaries over the area. When the final count had been made, 6 of the small force of Liberators were gone, but in return the enemy had lost 23 fighters confirmed and 13 more probables, while 5 miles below smoke and flame testified to the havoc wreaked on the ground. For their part in that great battle, the 44th was awarded the Blue Badge to the War Department Distinguished Unit Citation. They later received a cluster when they, with the 93rd and 389th, were honored for Ploesti. While the main force of Liberators were in Africa, the 2nd Bombardment Wing was joined by another group, the 392nd. Shortly thereafter, the wing became the 2nd Bombardment Division, and group after group came overseas. On the full roster of 2nd Division's units were the 445th, 446th, 448th, 489th, 453rd, 457th, 446th, 467th, 491st, and the 492nd. Deeper and deeper fly the Liberators as the number of aircraft on each mission grows steadily larger. Munster, Solingen, Ludwigshafen, Bremen, Kiel, all these are familiar targets. And then suddenly Danzig, Norway, and southern France all come under the bomb sights of the B-24s. Emden, Germany, the 27th of September 1943, brought a change in heavy bomber procedure. Cloud layers that completely covered German targets wasted innumerable days in the winter bombing season, scrubbing or causing missions to be abandoned even after the planes were in the air. The mission to Emden altered that. As a result of experiments carried out by Liberator squadrons, targets were bombed successfully by instruments through 10/10 cloud cover. The day before Christmas of '43, a new element entered the target material for the heavy bombers. Oddly shaped construction jobs just across the channel are revealed as the threatened pilotless bomb sites, and air bombardment is called on to destroy as many as possible. The Liberators made more than 50 missions to the Pas-de-Calais, and the heavy bombers were credited with effectively delaying the launching of the first buzz bomb and drastically reducing the number finally hurled against England. The Battle of Gotha was won by the 2nd Division during the week of the 8th Air Force's blitz on Germany's aircraft factories in February of 1944. For more than 2.5 hours, the Liberators of the 2nd Division fought their way through a hell of bullets, shells, and bombs. Desperately, the German fighters, nearly 150 of them, tried to halt the task force. They called on every trick, raking the Liberators with machine gun and cannon fire, diving to within 50 yards of the formation in suicidal attacks, even air-to-air bombs in their attempts to break up the formation. The bombs went down right on the target, flattened nearly every building of the powerful Gotha Wagenfabrik plant, producer of a third of Germany's twin-engine aircraft. The Nazis lost 76 planes that day. One B-24 group lost 13, another 7. Losses were high, but Gotha, monument to the courage, persistence, and tenacity of the purpose of the 2nd Division's men, never recovered. On D-Day, the skies were almost clear of opposition, a tribute to the masterful job of precision bombing during that week of blitz in February 1944. For their achievements on this mission, the 392nd and the 445th Bomb Groups were awarded the Distinguished Unit Citation. High spots of the spring campaign, which saw the Libs hit airfields, aircraft works, oil refineries, and other strategic targets in Germany and occupied Germany, were several of the missions to Big B, Berlin, the first of which took place on March 4th. In May, there came a decided change in the targets. With the German production severely curtailed as a result of Allied bombing, the Libs, along with the 8th Air Force fortresses, switched to strikes on tactical targets, gun positions on the French coast, railway yards and junctions, bridges and airfields were hit to hamper the German defenses in the coming invasion of Europe. D-Day, Day of Achievement, that day for which the freedom-loving people of the world had waited for so long. 4 times on June 6th, the 2nd Division Liberators take to the air to fly over the bridge of boats put across the channel for the invading forces. The first time they pound beach defenses, a few hundred yards ahead of the invaders, hitting the beaches and assault boats. The rest of the day they devote to blasting communications behind the beachheads, railroads, bridges, and road junctions. The Luftwaffe put up practically no opposition that day, a tribute to the bombing by the 8th Air Force Libs and forts of Germany's aircraft industry and Air Force installations. After D-Day, losses began to decrease. The Luftwaffe showed up less and less often for combat. Gunners of the division downed an occasional jet-propelled enemy fighter, but the enemy reserved his force for sporadic attacks on straggling squadrons or flights separated from the main formation. B-24 still failed to return, but the rapidly clearing area of liberated France provided airfields for emergency landings and safety for crews forced to bail out. Flak gradually disappeared until an airman returning from Brunswick was able to report only 6 bursts out of range from that once bristling city. Vivid memories of Ploesti loom up again with the low-level supply mission to our airborne army in Holland in September 1944. Loaded with ammunition, equipment, and medical supplies for the 1st Allied Airborne Army, the Liberators fly across the Netherlands at midday. Dodging church steeples, they have the unique experience of welcome from the long-oppressed people as they are waved on to their objective. Small arms fire from German forces caused many wounds, but failed to halt the delivery of cargo to the waiting infantrymen at Arnhem and Nijmegen. Now, as the ground forces rolled back the enemy, the Libs were back again in strategic bombing, with the emphasis on shutting off Germany's oil supply, without which the Wehrmacht cannot move. And when the Allies reached the Siegfried Line, the Libs were there, too. Cologne, where many railroad lines converge, was bombed again and again. So were the other rail centers of western Germany, Koblenz, Karlsruhe, and Kassel. The fortress at Metz was hit in a successful move to ease the path for the tanks and infantry advancing on the city. Even with the enemy being crowded from both sides farther and farther back into his own country, there was still work for the Liberators to do. After the record-breaking blow behind Rundstedt's lines on December 24th, the Liberators continued for days to hit German communications along the Western Front, and wherever German industry reared its head, there was another target for the B-24s. On March 24th, the Liberators were assigned the task of dropping supplies to our troops crossing the Rhine. Another low-altitude mission, this one the jumping-off point for the final campaign. Trucks arrived at the 392nd Bomb Group with supplies to be loaded in the Libs. They were backed up to the bombers where armament crews let go the tailgates and started unloading with vigor, until Lester Morris, a tech sergeant from Englewood, California, informed the men that some cases contained grenades and similar high-sensitive explosives. The unloading continued as rapidly, but a little more gently. The Liberators were to supply both American and British troops one-half the force to carry long, white metal canisters and wicker hampers containing British supplies, the other half loaded oblong, brown, padded crates, reels, gasoline jerry cans, and bundles of goods for U.S. forces. Parachutes of different colors were used to identify ammunition, gasoline, rations, and signal supplies. Thousands of men are parachuting from aircraft or landing by gliders at pre-designated areas on the east bank of the Rhine as the Libs start out on their mission. 480 Liberators loaded to capacity fly the same routes into the target where they can release their unusual load. Just before reaching the Rhine, the first of the supply bombers passed the last of the British gliders and then swooped down to even lower levels to see Allied armies crossing the Rhine in force. This operation was coordinated directly with the advance across the Rhine by Field Marshal Montgomery's 21st Army Group and the Allied 1st Airborne Army. The fields east of the Rhine are studded with gliders as the bombers of the 2nd Division roar over the dropping area to release nearly 500 tons of all-important supplies and equipment, dropping and parachuting more than 4,400 canisters and bundles. Intense enemy flak meets the bombers at several points. Flying in as low as 100 feet, they go through a hail of fire from 20mm anti-aircraft cannon, machine gun, and small arms, but the drop is made to the men waiting below. Then swinging back with supplies still being dropped, a Lib waist gunner later said,
"The battlefield was an inferno of burning objects, while fierce gunfire and battles raged between our airborne troops and the Germans. What we experienced was much worse than any heavy flak, but we dropped all our supplies for our ground troops, and as we pulled away we could see our boys picking up the cartons. It made us feel pretty good to help give such close support to the boys fighting down there."
Recrossing the Rhine again at the bombed-out city of Wiesel, more planes and gliders were still winging their way east in a seemingly never-ending flow. And now the heavy bombers are soon to be stood down. On the first mission in 1942, 20 Liberators reached their target and dropped 50 tons of bombs. Early in 1945, more than 75,000 Liberators had been dispatched by the 2nd Division, dropped 160,000 tons of bombs on enemy-held territory. Nearly 1,000 Liberators were missing in action from the close to 400 missions they had flown, and with them about 10,000 men. 1,050 enemy fighters had been knocked from the sky by the 50 caliber guns of the big bombers, and another 256 were probably destroyed. The damage to the enemy that had been done on the ground cannot be reckoned, but would probably be counted in billions of dollars and man-hours. For the heroism and gallantry they have displayed, the Liberator Airmen have been awarded many medals and decorations: 5 Congressional Medals of Honor, 41 Distinguished Service Crosses, 156 Silver Stars, as well as countless distinguished flying crosses and air medals for aerial achievement. 3 groups have been awarded the War Department's Distinguished Unit Citation, one of them, the 44th, having received it twice. The Liberators' battle against the enemy has taken them from Africa to Norway, from the coast of France to the farthest border of Germany. The enemy capital at Berlin was bombed. The industries of Paris were also bombed when the enemy was there. Then, when the Germans were gone, the Liberators flew food to starving cities, Liberators in spirit as well as in name. On the 22nd of May, 1945, as many men of the 2nd Air Division were already leaving the ETO to join in the Battle of the Far East, General Kepner, then commanding general of the 8th Air Force in Europe, presented the Lord Mayor of Norwich a memorial fund donated by the members of the 2nd Division in honor of their comrades lost in the air battle of Europe.
My Lord Mayor, on behalf of the officers and men of the 2nd Air Division, It gives me great pleasure to present to you this document establishing a trust fund of £20,000 for the construction of our memorial in the city of Norwich. This memorial, in the form of the entrance hall to your new public library and its adjacent reading rooms, will be our tribute to our comrades who made the supreme sacrifice for their country in carrying out the great air offensive against Germany from English bases. This memorial, we feel, will not only be a shrine which the families and loved ones of those gallant men may visit in years to come, but will also express our deep gratitude to the people of the Norfolk-Norwich community for their marvelous friendliness and hospitality during our stay in your country.
I went to college after I graduated from high school in 1940, and the following year, 1941, was Pearl Harbor. I had learned how to fly in my first year at Dakota Wesleyan. They had a civilian pilot training program. It was a course under which you had to solo after 8 hours instruction. I'm frank to say I was scared to death when the instructor said you're ready to solo, but I pulled it off all right, and my courage increased with each passing hour after that. So I decided when the war came that that's the place where I should go. There were 10 of us at this little school at Dakota Wesleyan who wanted to be pilots. We borrowed one car from the president of the school, one from the dean, and went to Omaha, where both the Navy Air Corps and the Army Air Corps had their recruiting offices. We were talking on the way down, you know, should it be the Navy, should it be the Army? One guy picked up a rumor after we arrived in Omaha that if you went to the Army recruiting station, they'd give you a free meal ticket to an Omaha cafeteria. So on the strength of that ticket, probably worth about $1, and an unsubstantiated rumor, all 10 of us joined the Army Air Corps. I tell my friends that's the cheapest I've ever sold out. So I volunteered just a few weeks after the Pearl Harbor attack. They didn't have enough planes, they didn't have enough instructors, they didn't have enough runways to take care of all the people that were volunteering. So I had to wait another year, and it enabled me to get to my junior year before I was called. But when I got in the Air Force, they sent us first to ground school. I was at the University of Southern Illinois for several months, learning mechanics, meteorology, maintenance, all these things. And they put us through a real tough physical training thing. I can't remember how many push-ups we had to do in a day, and pull-ups and squats and everything else. We were hard as rocks by the time we got out of that ground training. Then we went to San Antonio, Texas, where we had more ground school and more physical training. My first flight school was Muskogee, Oklahoma, primary training, and we moved every 9 weeks till we were shipped overseas. 9 weeks of primary at Muskogee, 9 weeks of basic at Coffeyville, Kansas, 9 weeks of multi-engine at Pampa, Texas, then to Liberal, Kansas, where I learned how to fly a B-24 bomber, the biggest bomber we had at that time. Then out to Idaho, where my crew was with me by then. We picked them up in Lincoln, Nebraska, and went to Mountain Home, Idaho, the 2nd Air Force, and practiced formation flying, practiced landings and takeoffs, practiced night flying, all of those things. Then overseas. The 15th Air Force that I was with was based in North Africa, but just before I went overseas, they moved up to Italy. The Americans had taken over a large part of Italy, and our base was on the west side of Italy, of the big Italian boot, at a little town called Cerignola. We bordered the Adriatic Sea. You know, they brought us along from step to step so systematically that I felt thoroughly trained before I went into combat. I didn't know as much about the mechanical aspects of the airplane as I wish I had. There were times when I wish I had known why certain things happened, but I had a good engineer on board, and that was his job, to follow the mechanical aspects of the plane. I think that by the time I was ready to fly my first mission, I had confidence that I was well trained and that I could pull it off. Now, I should tell you that the Air Corps had a rule that a bomber pilot didn't fly in the pilot seat for the first 5 missions. You flew as a co-pilot with an experienced pilot who'd been on a number of missions. I had a fellow by the name of Howard Surbeck, now deceased, a wonderful pilot, and he broke me in the co-pilot seat, and by the time I moved over to the command seat, I felt well prepared to take over. I got the Distinguished Flying Cross, not for flying, but for a landing. Of course, you have to fly to land, so that's more of a joke than anything else. But we had lost 3 engines. We were hit heavily by flak. Down to 1 engine, we're losing altitude. And I said to the navigator, "Where's the nearest runway?" He said, "Well, there's a little base in the Adriatic Sea just off the coast of Yugoslavia, but the runway is only 2,200 feet long. You need 5,000 to land a 4-engine bomber." I said, "Well, 22 feet is better than going in the drink, so I'm going to do it." I said, "If any of you guys want to bail out, there'll be no criticism. You can bail out right over this island if you wish. It's in friendly hands." Nobody wanted to get out, so I made the landing. When we hit the ground, I knew that I had to be right at the end of that runway, and as luck would have it, and maybe a little skill, maybe a little experience, I hit right on the end of the runway, and the co-pilot and I both got on those brakes and just rode them hard all the way down. The tires were just riddled, but we ground to a halt about 10 feet short of the end of the runway, and that's how I won the Distinguished Flying Cross. Nobody could believe that landing, but there it was. You know, I got to the point where I loved that whole B-24. It was a clumsy, tough airplane to fly, had that narrow Davis wing. When the aircraft people first looked at it, they swore it wouldn't fly, but it did. The B-17 was the other 4-engine bomber, used primarily out of England. We were based when I went overseas in Italy, but I learned to really respect that airplane. It would fly further and faster and carry a bigger bomb load than the B-17. The B-17 was easier to handle. It could fly a little higher. So they each had their virtues, but I became a B-24 champion. It got me over the target and back home sometimes in pieces, but we still got back 35 times, so I developed great faith in that airplane. There was a mission that came, as I remember it, about midpoint in my 35 missions. It might have been the 15th or the 17th, somewhere therein. And we lost an engine on the way into the target. You know, some of these planes had a lot of missions on them before I got there, but we decided to go ahead. We weren't too far from the target and drop our bombs on the target. So I increased the power so we could fly on 2 engines. That put a strain on the other 3, and over the target we got hit and lost a 2nd engine. Then we really had to advance the power to fly on 2 engines. And as we turned off the target, one of my crewmen in the back end of the plane said, "I hate to tell you this, but we had 10 bombs on board, 500-pound bombs, demolition bombs, and one of them somehow jammed in the bomb rack, and we can't seem to get it loose." I said, "Well, I'm going to come down some from altitude so we can cut down on the strain on the other 2 engines, but you're going to have to get rid of that bomb." This was difficult because you've got a catwalk about that wide, and you open the bomb bay doors, you look right straight down, 15, 20, 25,000 feet, 5 miles. So it's difficult, but they got out there as I came down some from altitude. I think I actually came down to about 10,000 feet, and the bomb broke loose. It was a bright, sunshiny day, and I could actually see where it hit. You couldn't always do that, but it lit right in the middle of a little Italian farmyard and exploded, of course. The house went up in the air, the barn, the chicken house, the tool sheds, everything that makes up a farm just went all to smithereens. I looked at my watch. It was right at 12 o'clock noon, and I figured, here I probably blew up an innocent farm family that were having their noon lunch, and thought they were safely out of the combat area. I was really sick at heart at that. We got back to the base, and they gave me a cable that my wife had given birth to our first daughter, our daughter Anne. I thought, gosh, I had a certain amount of rejoicing about this new baby. But I thought, we brought a child into the world, but I probably killed somebody else's children, maybe the whole family. Now, this is 40 years afterwards, when I was thinking the same thing when my wife and I went to Austria, where I was to be a guest professor at the University of Innsbruck. And the television station in Austria, I think they just have one network, asked me if I would go on and talk about World War II. I did that, and I told this story. That night, about midnight, an elderly farmer, Austrian farmer, called the television station and said, "Tell the American pilot, the United States Senator who was on television tonight, that was my farm that got hit. But you can tell him that while Austria went along with Hitler in the war, I hated Adolf Hitler. I didn't agree with anything he stood for. And I saw that bomber coming. It was a lone bomber, and the main force was way up above. They'd gone over a little earlier. And I got my wife and 3 children out of the house. We hid in a big ditch, and nobody was hurt. They're all doing well now, 40 years later. So after all those years, I get redemption for my anguish over that mission. I don't mean to say I was brooding about it all those years. I had a busy life, but whenever I thought about it, that came to my mind. So I finally got relief from that emotional burden. The B-24 bomber that I flew was the most produced airplane that we had in World War II. 18,000 of those planes were built. But sad to relate, half of the bombers and half of the crews that flew with them never made it through the war. The fatality rate among those bombing crews and planes was 50%. Half survived, half died in the war. So the fatality rate was double that of the officers on the land war. We had heavy losses there too. Second lieutenants, first lieutenants, a lot of those were shot down, but that rate was just half of the fatalities among the flying officers in the war. It may seem hard to believe, but we didn't know what the fatality rate was until years later when Stephen Ambrose wrote his great book called The Wild Blue, and then the subtitle, The Men and Boys Who Flew the B-24s Over Germany in World War II. And he did the research at the Pentagon to document this figure that half of the crews in the B-24s never survived the war. I think if I had known that was the fatality rate while I was flying there, I'd have been even more frightened than I was. What would happen? You know, we'd go off with maybe, let's say, 350 bombers on a mission, 250, 500, whatever the day's order called for. And we'd see one or two or maybe three planes shot down. And we'd say, well, you know, that's too bad, but that means look at all the ones that got through, you know. And what we didn't do is to count day by day, 3 this day, 6 another day, 1 another day, and it keeps going until by the time you get through 35 missions, only half the people you started with are still around. You know, I had the same crew all the way through, with 1 or 2 exceptions. My navigator was killed about halfway through my tour of duty. He was flying with another crew that day, and they were shot down, and apparently he didn't have time to parachute to safety. So we lost Sam Adams, our navigator. That was a sad day. He was listed as missing in action because they didn't know what happened. So we had that empty cot in our tent for the rest of the war. There were 3 of us there, my co-pilot, Bill Rounds, the new navigator who took Sam's place, Carol Cooper, and myself. We had a tail gunner exchange too. He developed some chronic air sickness and had to be replaced. But by and large, I had the same crew all the way through for the 35 missions we were required to fly. You know, as I got up to past 30, I began to count by single digits, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it's all over. I'm through. When I got up to 2 or 3, still had a couple to go, I thought, gosh, wouldn't it be awful if after all we've gone through, we got hit. But fortunately, that last mission, which I think was the worst one we had, the Germans were pulling their aircraft guns back as they were driven west by the Russians and driven east by General Patton. And so they'd pull those aircraft guns with them. They kept getting them more and more concentrated. We had 110 holes in that airplane. We lost our brakes, we lost our flaps, we couldn't put the landing gear down except by a very laborious cranking process. It took quite a while. So when I landed, I had the crew, prior to that, tie 2 parachutes, one on each side. There was a big stanchion down the middle. Tie them there and throw them out the side windows when we hit the ground. And they did that, and the parachutes flared, and that's how we got stopped without crashing off the runway at the end. The one thing that kind of put my mind somewhat at risk, I knew that every time we unloaded those bombs, there were probably human beings dying, but at least we had the Norden bomb site. We didn't bomb at night. The British would load up those big Lancaster bombers like you would a freight car, took them up until they flew at night, took them up until they were over the city and could see the light, and dumped them. We didn't do that. We had that Norden bomb site, and when we went after a tank factory or an aircraft factory or an oil refinery, our bombardiers were pretty good at zeroing in on the target. So it meant that the civilians killed were minimal compared to the saturation type of bombing. So I took some consolation from that, but I also knew that there were people dying down there that we couldn't avoid from the so-called collateral damage. The other thing that consoled me is that the 15th Air Force, at least during the time I was there, 1944 and the first half of 45, we concentrated on Hitler's oil refineries, whether they were in Czechoslovakia or Romania or Poland or Germany or Austria. And I'm telling you, we grounded the German Air Force. They just didn't have enough petroleum to function. One of the senior British generals wrote his memoirs. I don't remember his name now, but he said that he knew the war was over when one day in mid-1945, he flew up over the combat lines, and he noticed as he was looking out of his plane with binoculars that there was a line of German tanks that were just crawling. Couldn't understand it. He had a way of calibrating the speed. So he had the pilot go down lower, and he discovered those tanks were being pulled by horses. They didn't have any gasoline. And he said he knew the war was over when that happened. So I know that we had the consolation of knowing that we were shortening the war. We were saving American troops. We were even saving German troops, Russian troops, by shortening that war. And no matter what is said about these bombing surveys, which showed that some of the places we bombed very quickly were back in commission, when you hit an oil refinery, you put it out of business if your bombing is at all accurate. So in that sense, I think I could justify the kind of precision bombing that we were doing. I believed 100% in the American war in World War II. We had no alternative. Hitler was gobbling up one country after another. France had been knocked over, the Scandinavian countries, and he was bound to wipe out the whole continent, and I think he'd have done it. So I don't have any regrets about my participation in World War II. You know, it's interesting about war. We were delivering stocks of food that we had in abundance, medicines, bedding, clothing, everything. In some cases, the people we'd been bombing just a week earlier, but we knew they were destitute, and you know, after a war, you have to heal the wounds and help the sick and help the homeless. And we did that. So that was the way I ended the war. I then flew my crew and 16 meteorologists who were going to go back to the States and then keep going till they got to Asia. They were going into the Japanese war, which ended before they got there. But anyway, I took that load of men back with me across the Atlantic, and when we finally hit American soil near Boston, everybody got out and kissed the ground. One thing I learned in Italy, a country that's now probably the best fed country in Europe, is that in World War II, they were at the edge of starvation. The men were all up at the battlefronts, young mothers and young housewives trying to do the farming and keep things together, but it was a pretty tough time. I saw young mothers out pawing through our garbage dumps early in the morning to take bits of food back to their children. Sometimes we'd see the same women on the streets at night selling themselves for a few dollars to keep their body and soul together and for their children. So I think that began a lifelong commitment on my part to reducing hunger in the world. I persuaded Bob Dole, a Republican senator from Kansas, to join with me, and we're now pushing what's called the McGovern-Dole Food for Education and Nutrition. It was authorized by Congress, and we're now operating in a number of countries with school lunch programs. I want to see that program extended. It's under UN auspices with the United States in the lead. I want to keep that expanding until we reach every hungry school kid around the world.
We're back to 1944 to look at a film that's not your typical Hollywood war epic. It's a documentary called Target for Today, and it gives us a raw, unfiltered look into the heart of the American war effort during World War II. Target for Today isn't a story of actors in a studio. It's a gripping account of a real-life bombing mission, from the intense planning stages to the perilous flight over enemy territory. The film follows the men of the U.S. Army Air Force's 8th Air Force as they prepare for and carry out a daylight raid on industrial targets in Nazi Germany. We see the faces of real servicemen, the pilots, the navigators, the gunners, all playing their own parts in this high-stakes drama. What makes this film so remarkable is its authenticity. Directed by William Keighley, Target for Today was filmed with unprecedented access to every level of the operation. You're in the briefing rooms, you're on the airfields, and you're in the skies with the B-17 and B-24 bombers. The combat footage is real, a stark reminder of the dangers these men faced. General Hap Arnold, the head of the Army Air Forces, called the missions depicted in the film the greatest strike ever, a testament to their importance in crippling the German war machine. Interestingly, Target for Today was more than just a military film. It was also shown in civilian theaters across the United States. The goal was to bring the reality of the war home to the American people, and to encourage them to support the war effort by buying war bonds. It was a powerful piece of propaganda, but also a deeply humanizing look at the individuals who fought in the skies over Europe. So, if you want to understand the air war of World War II, beyond the special effects and Hollywood glamour, Target for Today is a must-see. It's a time capsule, a tribute, and a stunning piece of documentary filmmaking.
Almost 3 miles below this formation of American flying fortresses, there lies Marienburg in East Prussia. Up to this moment, one of the most important cogs in Germany's war machine. The specific target on which this lead bombardier is lining up his bomb sight is the Focke-Wulf 190 plant. Up to this instant, this aircraft factory has been accounting for almost 50% of Germany's total FW-190 fighter assembly.
Bombs away.
Tons of bombs rain down in a tight pattern of destruction. This, remember, is no area attack. It is an assault on one single target, and any bomb that falls outside that target has failed to achieve its purpose. The assembly of fighters in this Focke-Wulf factory has come to a sudden and violent end. To many, the bombing of Germany probably seems to be little more than a series of capricious adventures, one attack unconnected in any way with the one that preceded it or the one that will follow it. It is easy for the average citizen to envision the positions of ground armies because of maps like these, which make the positions of the contesting forces quite clear. It is harder to express so graphically the progress of a bombing program. Yet there is a real line in this battle of Germany, not a geographical front, but an industrial one. In the British Isles, there are the Allied air forces. On the European continent, we have Regensburg, Marienburg, Bremen, Oschersleben, Warnemünde, and Kassel. These are the major German fighter assembly plants, and as such are actually the center of Germany's industrial defense line. However, these are only the places where the aircraft is assembled into the finished fighting machine. Component parts for German fighters are made at Anklam. Here's a real line in this battle of Germany, not a geographical front, but an industrial one. In the British Isles, there are the Allied air forces. On the European continent, we have Regensburg, Marienburg, Bremen, Oschersleben, Warnemünde, and Kassel. These are the major German fighter assembly plants, and as such are actually the center of Germany's industrial defense line. However, these are only the places where the aircraft is assembled into the finished fighting machine. Component parts for German fighters are made at Anklam, the Weser-Flugzeugbau works at Bremen, the Great Hedderheim propeller works near Frankfurt, the aircraft tire factory at Hanover, the CAM ball bearing plant at Paris, and the ball bearing factories at Schweinfurt. Obviously, an assembly plant can't operate if other plants aren't building the parts from which the enemy planes will be assembled. Holz produced 29% of all German synthetic rubber production and is in fact responsible for 18% of our entire supply of rubber, natural or synthetic. At Bochum, there's a great steel plant producing high-grade aviation steel. Herøya, up in Norway, is a great producer of aluminum and magnesium, metals which figure importantly in aircraft production. At Ham, there are great railroad marshalling yards, having a capacity of 10,000 freight cars a day. Much of the tonnage handled here is closely connected with the manufacture, assembly, maintenance, and repair of enemy aircraft. And so it is all over Germany and occupied Europe. Everywhere there are plants and installations that contribute directly or indirectly to the making of German aircraft. Industrial bastions which must first be ripped apart before the enemy's armies can be destroyed. The smashing blows by the Allied air forces at Holz, Herøya, Regensburg, Schweinfurt, Hanover, and Frankfurt have had the result of piercing the German industrial line to the extent of 37.5% of estimated single-engine fighter production in September of 1943. If this rate of drop continues, there can be only one result: the eventual disappearance of the Luftwaffe as a defensive force. But these attacks have had other far-reaching effects. For instance, in January of 1943, just when the 8th Bomber Command had started daylight attacks against Germany proper, 42% of the German fighter strength was concentrated in Western Europe, 33% of it in Russia, and 25% in the Mediterranean area. After 10 months of American bombers appearing by day over Germany, the figures line up more like this. On the Russian front, 19%. In the Mediterranean area, 12%. And in Western Europe, 69%. Germany thought it was urgent enough to withdraw fighters from two important theaters, all in a vain attempt to save their crumbling industry from the grim, destructive blows of the British-American bomber offensive. That is why the Battle of Germany is being fought. Now we come to the problem: how are the targets selected? And what enormous effort is necessary for the 10 or 15 minutes that our air task forces will be over any given target? The daylight bombing offensive against Germany is the responsibility of the 8th Air Force. Under the 8th Air Force are the 8th Bomber Command, the 8th Fighter Command, and the 8th Air Service Command, all of whom contribute to every bombing mission. But it is the Bomber Command which is charged with the actual destruction of the selected targets. The Bomber Command, with which this picture is primarily concerned, is divided into 3 divisions. Each division has a number of combat wings. Each combat wing, in turn, has 3 groups. This is the chain of command. Since the operations which we are to follow, there have been some organizational changes, but they are principally changes of nomenclature and have not affected the broad strategical and tactical purposes of the organization. For instance, what is referred to as Bomber Command in this picture is now the 8th Air Force. Weather is the greatest single enemy of the 8th Bomber Command, for here is to be found the most changeable, treacherous weather in the world. To keep the most accurate possible check on weather conditions all over Europe, the RAF has established vast communication and reporting systems. Weather planes such as this Mosquito and our own B-17s are continually in the air in an effort to know in advance what the weather will be over Europe and the United Kingdom. Men like this supply a major portion of the data from which 8 main weather maps of Europe and of the United Kingdom are drawn each day. In addition, there are 4 upper air maps and 8 maps of a miscellaneous classification. In this room, all weather information is collected, coordinated by the RAF, and sent out by teletype to every responsible command. This is the weather section in the operations block at the Bomber Command. Here, the information gleaned from the weather stations is put together and correlated into weather maps. Accurate predictions must be made as to the direction and speed of the wind, downward and forward visibility, temperature, humidity, possible icing conditions, and probable atmospheric pressure at the bases, en route, and over the target. Upon the findings made in this room will depend whether or not there will be an American bombing of a German target tomorrow. This is the operations room of the Bomber Command. Here is where the wheels are put in motion for any American bombing attack. Right now, the officers you see are waiting for the Commanding General's morning conference. They are the A3, or operations officer, the operational intelligence officer, a weather officer, and other members of the staff.
What's the weather prospects today, Major?
Looks like most of Germany will be pretty good, sir. But we have a warm front approaching from down here, which we do not expect to affect the bases until late in the evening.
How's the weather at Anclam?
At Anclam, sir, we expect 2 to 5 tenths of low cloud and small amounts of middle and high cloud above 18,000 feet. Visibility 6 to 8 miles.
How about Marienburg?
At Marienburg, 2 to 4 tenths of low cloud, little or no middle or high cloud, visibility 6 to 8 miles.
What will it be at Danzig and Gdynia?
At Danzig and Gdynia, sir, 2 to 5 tenths of low cloud, 2 to 4 tenths of high cloud above 23,000 feet. Visibility in there about 5 miles.
Give me the map of Anklam and the picture of the aircraft factory there.
Yes.
All right, Marienburg, the Focke-Wulf factory.
Yes, sir.
We will attack Marienburg with 2 combat wings, Anklam with 2 combat wings, shipyards of Danzig with 2 combat wings, and the port facilities at Gdynia with 2 combat wings. That will require a maximum effort.
Now the various specialist officers then go into action. This is the operational intelligence section. Here are target files containing complete information as to the type, construction, and vulnerability of the targets. This data is gathered both from photo interpretation of aerial pictures and from confidential ground sources. On the basis of this information, the aiming point for the attack will be selected. The aiming point is a building or installation in the approximate center of the target. Here, operational research experts are minutely studying the architectural and construction details of the targets. It will be their duty to recommend, on the basis of studies previously made, the types of bombs and the proper fusing to accomplish the greatest possible destruction of the objective. These studies of the Arado factory at Anklam are immensely important, since the nose and tail fuses of the bomb can be adjusted to give varying degrees of delay between the time of initial impact and the explosion. For example, an improperly fused bomb would react something like this. Result: very superficial damage that may hardly even cause delay in production. On the other hand, here's what happens when a properly fused bomb strikes the same factory. 2 bombs of exactly identical weight and explosive power have totally different effects because one was fused properly and the other was not. It is the responsibility of the operational research section to determine proper bomb fusing. Here, the commanding general and the operations officer are working out the overall planning of each of the missions with the staff bombardier, the staff navigator, and the flak officer. This is a complex business because of the multiple nature of the attack.
We'll attack Anklam 1 hour before we attack the other targets. That should draw most of the German fighters on the Anklam force. The Anklam force is big enough to take care of itself.
You mean along the same course, sir?
No, send them a little south. They'll act as a better diversion.
This would be the best place across the coast from the standpoint of pilotage.
But, sir, the flak concentration at that point is quite heavy, the heaviest along the coast. We could rather move them a little further south, where the general suggests, and they would not run into flak difficulties at that point.
How is that for the navigation viewpoint?
That's a very good landfall, sir.
All right, we'll cross at that point, and you adjust the flight times accordingly.
Take care of it, Darrell.
Yes.
While this is going on, the various liaison officers stationed at Bomber Command headquarters are busy keeping their respective commands acquainted with the course of events. The closest liaison is maintained with both the RAF Fighter and Bomber Commands, the Royal Navy, the 8th Fighter Command, and the 9th Bomber Command. It is through these liaison officers that requests will be made for the necessary fighter support, diversionary effort by the medium bombers, air-sea rescue patrols, and so on. Officers at Fighter Command immediately look up plan number 2340 to find out what part the fighters are expected to play in the next day's operations. Similarly, the 9th Air Force is informed that Bomber Command intends to lay on plan number 2340. It will be the duty of the mediums to attack enemy airfields at a time that will cause maximum interference with German attempts to intercept the heavy bombers. Right now, weather officers are getting ready their forecast for the General's late afternoon conference, where final decisions will be made.
Right in there as planned. Yeah, it should. Should be okay. Thanks. Good enough.
Bye.
Does your morning forecast still hold? Yes, sir. There's practically no change in the situation, and we still expect the base weather to hold up for return. Send out the field order exactly as planned.
Yes. Get me the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd divisions on a conference call, please.
Already with your conference call. Go ahead, please.
Can you scramble? Okay. Over.
Okay, over.
Over. Okay, there's a mission tomorrow. Maximum effort with 5 task forces. The first task force, comprising 6 groups of the 1st Division, will hit 3948.
3948.
Secondary, 8731.
8731.
Last resort, 9009.
9009.
The second task force, comprising 5 groups of the 3rd Division, will hit 6848.
6848.
Secondary, 6424.
6424.
Last resort, 5381.
5381.
The third task force will comprise 4 groups of the 2nd Division, which will hit 6424.
6424.
Secondary, 5381.
5381.
Last resort, any industrial target of importance in Germany.
Okay.
The 1st and 3rd Divisions will each dispatch 1 air.
The field order now goes over the teletype to all interested units and command. The first step has been taken in the sequence of events that will finally result in bringing our planes over the targets and discharging their bomb loads. Command has conceived the mission and laid out general plans and routes. Division now plans in detail what command has ordered. The actual time of assembly of the various task forces is determined. The combat wings are assigned to their specific task forces, and the routes from assembly to rendezvous points and the target are charted. Many considerations go into the selection of the routes. Here is the commanding general of the 1st Division, which you will remember has 2 targets for tomorrow, Anklam and Gdynia.
Control point here at 0 hour. Another control point here for the northern unit, 0 plus 40 minutes. The other friendly...
From that timing, where will that put our northern force at the time that our southern force hits the IP?
The northern force should be about the east coast of Denmark at that time, sir.
It looks like we're going to catch all the fighters on the southern force, aren't we?
Looks very much that way, sir.
I think we'd better bend that route around so it's headed toward Berlin. If we can pin those German fighters down in Berlin until we can get started home, they'll never catch us.
At the 2nd Division, the target for tomorrow is Danzig.
Danzig, eh? That's fine. How many ships do we have tomorrow?
Well, sir, if you recall, General, on our last mission we had heavy battle damage, and not all those aircraft are repaired yet.
Call up the wing commanders and have them put pressure on the groups. Get their maintenance crews to work on these ships tonight, and get every possible airplane on the line in the morning.
The 3rd Division, which will have for its targets Marienburg and Gdynia.
Looks pretty good, sir. We're going to be right over a lake there for a good checkpoint at the turn. Going in against the sun. The sun will be at our back, sir.
Defenses at the target. Major Frost, what about the flak defenses? Sir, the upper target, there are 24 guns. That approach is good. The lower target isn't defended by heavy guns.
No heavy guns whatever at Marienburg.
None, sir.
The division's operations officer bases his precise plans on aircraft and crews available at the various groups. He then calls the combat wings to give them advance information before the field order actually arrives.
Operator, give me combat wings for conference, please. Okay. Scramble, over.
Hey.
Over.
Over.
For tomorrow, 1st Bomb Division will be called on for 2 task forces. First task force will be made up of 2 combat wings On targets 3948,
3948,
8731,
8731.
last resort 9009. Lead group in this task force.
Okay, ready to scramble? Over.
Okay. Over.
There'll be a mission tomorrow, and I want 2 groups from each combat wing. The target will be primary 6424. Secondary 5381.
538.
The last resort will be any industrial target of importance in Germany.
Okay.
There's an order coming through. The 3rd Division will furnish 8 groups. 1st and 2nd wings, comprising the 2nd Task Force, will hit 6848.
6848.
Secondary 6424.
6424.
Last resort 5381.
5381. Last resort.
Bomb load 500-pound GPs fused, 1/10 nose, 1/100 tail.
1/10 nose, 1/100 tail.
This is operations of the combat wing, a purely tactical unit having absolutely no administrative functions whatsoever.
How do you intend to make it?
Sir, we'll assemble over Molesworth.
Problems of takeoff and assembly are the particular specialized function of this organization. It is the primary business of the combat wing to get the airplanes of its group into the air at the proper times and to get them assembled once in the air.
Field order requires that we provide the 2nd Combat Wing and the 2nd Air Task Force. 89th Group will lead, 81st Group will be high, and 63rd Group will be low.
That means that Colonel Whitten will lead the combat wing on this mission?
That'll be fine.
The Bomber Command has asked for a maximum effort. That means every available plane is to be gotten into the air.
Ramsey, this field order has called for 3,100 gallons for the H's due to the distance. Now, they've called for maximum bomb load. How about that for the weight?
I think we'd better put 8 bombs in the H's and 12 in the D's. That keeps us around 65,000 pounds.
How about the CG?
CG is well forward, and I think it'll work out very well because of it downhole for a long period of time.
All right, we'll have 8 in the H's and maximum in the D's.
Most of the groups are going further than an American bomber has gone before. Combat wings must work out precisely the maximum bomb load in relation to the required gas load. Decisions made in this and other matters are added to the division's field order and passed on to the groups, the ultimate tactical unit, to the men who get the planes in the air and fly the mission. On the basis of the alert telephoned down to the group by the combat wing, the various agencies necessary to get the planes airborne on their mission wheel into action. Intelligence, operations, weather, signals, group navigators and bombardiers have the grave responsibility of passing on and making clear to the combat crews the vital target and route information furnished by Bomber Command and Bomb Division. The proper information folders, maps, weather maps and charts, and photographs have to be selected by the various group officers, and then the information therein passed on to the crews. In dispersal areas, ground crews are getting their planes in condition to fly the mission. The normal work of keeping an airplane fit for operation is enormous, even in peacetime. When you add to this already great job the element of battle damage, the problem becomes gigantic. Engines, wings, propellers, controls, wiring, fuel system, oxygen system, the 1,001 elements that go to make up the complex mechanics of a heavy bombardment plane all must be kept in perfect shape. The failure of any one of them on a mission can easily mean the loss of the plane and its personnel, or at best, such a failure will cause the plane to abort, that is, return to its base without having reached the target. It was originally estimated that about 37.5% of planes on hand would be effective at one time. However, the maintenance and repair has been so magnificently performed that sometimes up to 50% of planes on hand have been affected. Ordnance is already at work, getting the bombs in their racks and loading ammunition onto the plane. These are 100-pound incendiaries. These are 500-pound general-purpose bombs. And these are 1,000-pound GPs. The bombs have to be placed in their racks very carefully. One bomb sticking in its rack through careless placement might make a whole mission useless so far as that individual plane goes. Three o'clock in the morning. All over England at this exact moment, American air crews are being roused from their sleep.
Okay, fellas, roll out. We have a mission this morning. Breakfast in half an hour. Captain Kirk, Captain Thompson, Lieutenant Buska, Ackerson, Holloway, and Hawker scheduled to fly. We'll snap it up.
3 o'clock. This is a hell of a time to get a man out of bed.
You said it, Doc.
Come on, you drips, out of bed, breakfast in half an hour. Come on, Nick, rise and shine.
All right, you dodos, let's go. This is it. Okay, fellas, let's go. Come on, Swifty, get it up. Let's go.
Go, you guys. Hit the deck. Breakfast at 4, briefing at 5. Let's go.
That's fine, just when I had a 48-hour pass coming up.
Can't you guys? You're running my beauty sleep.
Through the cold of the English early morning, the combat crews go to their mess. They have no idea where they're going yet, but they know they'll be taking off in about 4 hours.
Well, boys, I wonder where we'll be today.
How do you figure those Jerrys will be today?
What do you think, Dub? They'll be shooting at us.
Sometimes I don't think those Jerrys got proper respect for us.
Well, what do you expect, Buster, the way you shoot?
Gee, look who's talking. You couldn't hit a cow in the flank with a bow feather.
Yeah, how about those two Jerrys I slapped down over Swainman?
I'll tell you what happened there. They heard that I was on a tail guns and they fainted from fright, that's all.
And so it goes. The 4,000 men who will go on this mission all know it will be a rugged deal. For some of them, it's their first mission. Others are veterans of many.
Happy to get through.
Now, at all the groups in the Bomber Command, the air crews are assembling in the briefing rooms to learn the target for today.
Okay, boys, let's go.
This is the briefing room of the 303rd Group. Here in a few minutes, the nature, locale, and route of today's mission will be made known to the men who fly it.
Target for today is Ankman. Specifically, you are to destroy the Arado factory. This plant manufactures aircraft components, principally wing and tail assemblies for the Focke-Wulf 190. The parts are then shipped to New Brandenburg for assembly. I cannot stress upon you too much the importance of this target. If it is successfully destroyed, it will have a very serious effect on Germany's aircraft production. Lights, please. Your IP is on the northwest side of New Brandenburg. Your heading on your run-up will be 45 degrees true. Immediately after your turn, you have an aerodrome on your right, almost directly north of the town. You should be able to pick out Friedland, 6 miles to your right and halfway between your IP and the target. Along this route, you should be able to see the main line railroad and the main road. From Friedland, the main road moves in toward your run-up and goes into Anklam, but the railroad terminates at Friedland. Shortly after passing Friedland, you will see a peculiarly formed wooded area on the right of your course. From here, pick out the aerodrome slightly southwest of the city and the intersection of the main railroad and the Peene River just outside of the town to the north.
Night target map.
Your target is across the railroad, beyond the town, in the area formed by the bend of the river.
And now a picture of the target.
This group of buildings here is your target. This building will be the aiming point. If your bomb pattern is concentrated in this area, it should very effectively knock out the factory. Lights, please.
At the 379th, the intelligent briefing continued.
These groups will bomb from an altitude of 13,000 feet. We feel that this low altitude will be equalized by the element of surprise which is with us, and it should ensure a thorough and complete finding of the target. Another task force is hitting the FW-190 assembly plant at Marienburg. If the two missions are successful, 65% of Jerry's remaining FW-190 production and assembly facilities will be destroyed.
At the 384th.
Other forces are attacking submarine yards, aircraft assembly plants, and units of the German fleet at Danzig and Gdynia. If these attacks succeed, they will destroy 13.5% of Germany's remaining U-boat construction and will destroy or immobilize a large section of the German Navy. The overall result of all four attacks will be to show the Hun that his efforts to protect his key industries by moving them to the east will be unsuccessful. It'll show him that we will seek out his industry and destroy it wherever he places it.
At the 351st, the intelligence briefing is completed.
Your secondary target this morning is the air park at Takeoff. This contains a Focke-Wulf assembly plant, a bombardier school, and you'll love this. It's the country club of the German Air Force. Should you be unable to bomb either of those two targets, then in that case, you will attempt to bomb the last resort target, which is the Heinkel assembly plant at Rostock. This is the only complete Heinkel unit in North Germany. It should be easily identified by the airfield adjoining, which has 6 intersecting runways running from 1,000 to 1,600 yards, and they're full of nice, fat, juicy Henkels.
A weather officer briefs the crews of the 305th Group going to Gdynia. synoptic situation today is this. We have a high-pressure system centered over northwest Europe, up here near Finland, extending southwestward down across the British Isles, causing an influx of south and southwesterly air going up in this direction, hence causing little or no cloud in the area up there and toward your target. There are no fronts to affect your route today except a tunnel system off to the west, which will cause an increase of medium and high clouds as you come back across the North Sea. Lights, please. At takeoff time, there will be 0 to 3/10 low clouds, also a layer of high clouds above 23,000 feet, 4 to 6/10 in amount. Also a middle layer of clouds in there between 10 and 12,000 feet. These medium and high clouds decreasing out over the North Sea to 3 to 5/10 each in amount. The low clouds will increase as you go out toward the North Sea to 3 to 5/10. Base 1,500 to 2,000 feet, tops 4 to 5,000 feet. There will be some fog patches over England, visibility 1 to 2 miles, except in those fog patches 500 to 1,000 yards. Visibility increasing rapidly out over the North Sea and the remainder of your route to 4 to 6 miles. The high clouds continuing 3 to 5/10, and also the middle clouds on toward the target, decreasing to 0 at the target. Low clouds continuing 3 to 5/10, decreasing to 2 to 4/10 at the target, base 2,000 feet, tops 5,000 feet. Visibility 4 to 6 miles. The temperature at bombing altitude, minus 26 degrees centigrade. The freezing level on your route out, 12,000 feet over the North Sea with light rime in the middle clouds. As you return back to base, that freezing level will lower to about 7,000 feet, continuing light rime in your middle clouds. Now on the return route, weather will be very similar to your route out, except your clouds increasing in amount as you proceed back across the North Sea. Base on return, visibility 4 to 6 miles.
A flak officer briefs the 389th Group of the 2nd Division going to Danzig.
Gentlemen, this morning, because we are going to cross the Danish coast at such a relatively low altitude, we've planned the route so as to avoid as much flak as possible. At any rate, any flak that you do encounter will be merely a deterrent in nature. However, you can expect heavy flak batteries at a place where we make landfall here at Namindegab, about a mile south of course. Also, there are known to be other heavy batteries 8 miles south of course there on the coast at Penn. Other batteries are known to be located here at Corsor, 20 miles south of course, on the island of Skelland. From then on to the target, you will have very little flak. Now, while you're crossing the coast and when you're over aerodromes and cities in Denmark, you are advised to take evasive action. Now then, when you get to the target itself, your anti-aircraft fire from the ground will be known to be supported by fire from naval units. Now, for those of you who have never been fired on by a naval unit, I want to add that naval units can put up a hell of an intense barrage, and you want to look out for it.
An operations officer briefs the crews of the 94th Group of the 3rd Division.
This group is leading a formation to Variansburg today. The 880th will be high group and the 764th will be low group. Bomb load of each ship will be 3 1,000 pounders, use 1/10 nose and 1/100th tail. Get that, bombardiers. You'll also carry 5 M47A incendiaries. You'll have full Tokyos, 1,000 gallons extra. Takeoff will be normal, assembly 1,000 feet over the field. After takeoff and assembly, proceed up this line to this point. This will be your combat wing assembly line. You'll leave the coast at this point here, that's Splasher 15. Let's not have any stooging around over England, it's a long haul. The 57th combat wing will follow us today at a 3-mile interval.
Now to the 95th group.
B-26s will be hitting the Veal area and the lowland at approximately 0 hour minus 40 minutes. One group of T-47s will strike the Warden area and join us for escort on the way out, joining us at approximately this point here. All other forces are using approximately the same route today. Just one point, that the Anklem force will probably pass us coming out as we're on our way in. You should see plenty of air activity. Let's hope that most of it is ours. The climb will commence at the English coast, climbing at 150 miles an hour, 100 feet per minute. We should reach bombing altitude approximately at the Danish coast, and under no circumstances should the Danish coast be crossed at less than 12,000 feet. We will drain Tokyo's as soon as possible. We should have plenty of gas. We figure approximately 400 gallons overload.
At the 100th, the operations briefing is completed.
Fly loose formation today with groups echelon to the right, till a point 75 miles from the enemy coast, where normal combat wing formation will be assumed. For visibility, everybody use Aldous lamp. The Royal Navy will be out patrolling the sea routes, so any crews that have to ditch will probably be rescued very quickly. Commanding General of Bomber Command asked us to put out a special effort today, so let's give it to him.
The commanding officer of the group invariably has a few words to say.
Men, the going's going to be rough. You're going to have to pull your necks in there and stay in there and pitch every minute.
Now, gentlemen, this is the type of target you don't want to have to go back after the second time. If you fly a good, tight formation, get a good, dense pattern on that target, we won't have to.
This Anklem crowd down here may pull most of the fighters off of us. However, that's just a guess. So particularly for you gunners, you've got to be on the ball from the Danish coast onto the target.
Flak will be heavy, probably accurate, but you've been through worse before. Remember that your biggest enemy is still the single-engine fighter plane.
Now, you bombardiers, take your time in going in on your releases. But don't allow the flak to worry you. It's merely to break up your formation. Now, if you get in any trouble up in this area, remember you can always board a sweep. Get down, it's neutral country. And it's close over there.
Could be rough. Don't think it'll be too bad. And whether it's easy or rough, I'll be sitting out in front, taking the whole works in.
The main briefing over, the pilots, navigators, bombardiers, radio operators, gunners receive separate specialized briefings. These briefings are very technical and very thorough, and are held so that every member of the combat crew will understand exactly what he can expect and what is expected of him. Any lack of thoroughness here might very well result in the failure of a mission. As dawn breaks over the English countryside, it finds the ground crews still working grimly in an effort to get every plane in the air that is scheduled to be dispatched. These men take as fierce a pride in their planes as do the air crews. To each of them, it is a personal tragedy, reflecting in some way on their capabilities when their airplane is forced to turn back without having completed its mission, or when they have been unable to get an expected plane ready in time for a mission. It's getting on to the time when the combat crews go to their planes. Here they are in the crew room, putting on their flying clothes. Clothes and equipment especially constructed to ward off the intense sub-zero cold which they will encounter so shortly.
All air crew members receive escape kits containing equipment that will help them get back to safety if they are forced down in Germany or in occupied territory. The pilots, co-pilots, navigators and bombardiers are also issued battle folders containing the maps which will be of such vital importance to them in the prosecution of the mission. The men turn in all personal papers and valuables, which might serve to give the enemy information in case of capture. Some of the crew members turn to their chaplain, whose ministrations are always available to the men of the bomber bases.
Most of all, is the effort of thee, O my God, who served with all my love. I firmly resolve with the help of thy gracious sister, confess my sins and penance, and amend my life. Amen. Misericorde vesti omnipotens Deus et mysticas vestis pericapos ad vitam aeternam. Amen. In gentium absolutiam mission peccatoribus Domini.
So changeable is the weather in the European theater that sometimes widely varying conditions will be found on fields only a few miles from each other. And now the last briefing of all, the final intimate conference around each airplane as the pilots recheck the details of the mission with their crews. Crew members have ceased to exist as individuals. They are now 10-man teams, and on the excellence of their teamwork will depend the success of the operation. On the perimeters of 20-odd fields of the 8th Air Force, more than 400 forts and liberators, with their 4,000 crew members, taxi for the takeoff. The lead plane of each squadron, upon becoming airborne, proceeds for about 90 seconds. It banks sharply to indicate its turning point, then goes into a slow left turn. Each successive plane in the element turns as soon as the pilot sees the plane in front of him turn. The element of 3 planes levels off at 1,000 feet and returns parallel to the takeoff runway at a distance of about 2 miles. Here the elements start to assemble into squadrons of 6. Continuing to circle the field, the squadrons then go to 2,000 feet, where the group assembly takes place. This accomplished, the group now moves on to the combat wing assembly point. Here is how the group stacks up from the side. The group has a depth of 850 feet. This is how the group looks from above. In the lead squadron, the second element is flown with the nose of the leader slightly behind and to the right of the right-wing aircraft, first element. The lead plane of the high squadron flies even with the lead plane, second element, lead squadron. The second element of the high squadron flies with the leader's nose just behind and to the left of the left-wing aircraft, first element. Here is the group as an enemy fighter pilot sees it, from head on. The first element of the lead squadron is stacked high left and low right. The first element of the low squadron is stacked high right and low left. Likewise, the first element of the high squadron is stacked high right and low left. All second elements are flown low. The second element of the lead squadron is stacked high left and low right. The second elements of the high and low squadrons are stacked high right and low left. Experience has shown that this arrangement of the group brings to bear on attacking fighters the greatest possible amount of firepower by utilizing to fullest advantage the field of fire of each gun in the formation. Again, it is proved to be the most maneuverable formation from which to execute the primary and all-important purpose of the mission, the dropping of the bomb loads on a precise target. Obviously, it would be desirable to stack as many bombing planes as possible in one defensive formation. However, it has been found that the largest practical defensive formation is the combat wing of 3 groups. Any formation of aircraft larger than this becomes unwieldy. This force has a depth of 3,000 feet. The nose of the lead aircraft of the low group is aligned with the tail and slightly to the left of the rearmost aircraft of the lead element, lead squadron, lead group. The nose of the lead aircraft of the high group is aligned with the tail of the rearmost aircraft of the lead element, lead squadron, lead group. The combat wing having been assembled, they now move on to make rendezvous with the rest of the task force. In this case, another combat wing. This plane from the force which is to attack Anklam is now approaching the Danish coast, and the formation is subject to enemy attack at any moment.
Charlie doing his twirl again. Wish I had something like that to play with. You guys wouldn't know what to do with a turret if you had one. Took 6 months to teach you how to pull a trigger. Well, they taught us anyway. All right, fellas. Can the swamp so I can keep the intercom open.
It is now 10:30 hours, and Denmark has been penetrated to some distance without any great opposition as yet. So far, there has been only some light and inaccurate flak at the coastline.
Some flank guns have opened up on us. Enemy fighters at 7 o'clock high. To come out of that dive. Joe, you're firing when they're too far out. Let them get in closer. Closer. Kiss that last guy. It was all my time. They're queuing up again. 4 o'clock high. Can you imagine waiting in line for what they're going to get? You're firing behind them. That's not me, that's unconscious up in the top turret. Unconscious just knocked down another one. Scratch 1 Heavy 109. I see it in flames at 2 o'clock level. There goes the pilot. Geez, Watson, you let that guy slip right past you. What do you want me to do? Throw him to the end? It's jammed. Firing rockets at us.
From 10:30 on, the Anklam formation has to contend with constant German fighter attack from all levels and all clock positions. During this time, the gunners aboard the fortresses knock down fighter after fighter. However, the gunnery of the forts, no matter how sensational it may be, is only to ensure the successful performance of the mission. It is not the job or purpose of forts or liberators to seek out action with enemy fighters. They merely defend themselves against enemy fighter attack so that they can destroy their target and bring their crews back safely to their home bases. An anxious moment comes now for the lead navigator and bombardier. The formation is approaching the initial point. That is, the point where the wing will turn off and make its bombing run on the target. Upon proper navigation to this point may rest the success of the entire mission.
Pilot to left waist gunner. We're over the IP. Release flares. Waist gunner to pilot. Roger.
Once the combat wing has reached the IP, it breaks up into 3 component groups, for the wing formation is too unwieldy for a unit bombing operation. As the IP is reached and the lead airplane of the lead group is about to make the turn, it fires 2 red flares, spaced 5 seconds apart. Then the group makes its turn onto the run-up. The low group goes on straight ahead for 20 seconds, then makes its turn. The high group proceeds for 20 seconds beyond the low group's turn, Then it turns on to the run-up. The most critical defensive period in the mission has begun. The wing, to accomplish most efficiently its primary purpose, the bombing of the target, has sacrificed its mutual defensive firepower, and the groups are thrown on their own. Now the crucial moment is almost here, the moment around which the entire mission revolves.
Pilot to Bombardier. Your ship. Bombardier to pilot. Roger. Bombardier to crew. Bombay doors open. Pilot to radio operator. Camera on.
The bomb bay doors open. The group is committed to its attack. No evasive action may be taken until the bombs are away. And at this time, the formation is most vulnerable to attack, both from flak and enemy fighters.
Bombs away. Bombs away. Bombs away. Bombs away.
At Marienburg, an hour later, the second task force comes over the target.
Bombs away.
The third task force comes over its target at Danzig.
Bombs away.
The fourth and fifth task forces arrive over the harbor area of Gdynia.
Bombs away. Bombs away on primary at 1142 hours.
Yes. Sir, in addition to Anklam, which was attacked at 11:51, Marysburg was attacked at 13:05.
It is standard procedure for the group leader to inform Bomber Command the moment the target has been attacked. Bomber Command, in turn, promptly informs the commanding general of the 8th Air Force.
Laker, I have the additional information. I reported to you that Anklam was attacked. All primaries were attacked. We received strike messages on all primaries. Danzig at 13:07, Marienburg at 13:05, and Gdynia at 13:11. Yes? Yes, sir. I'll advise you as soon as they land.
After getting bombs away and closing the bomb bay doors, the groups can now defend themselves again, at least to the extent of evasive action against the flak and fighter attack. The lead group flies a straight course for 15 seconds before turning off to the rally point. The lead group then proceeds to the rally point at an indicated airspeed of 155 miles per hour, making S-turns meanwhile to permit the trailing groups to catch up. The lead group crosses the rally point at a height 1,000 feet lower than bombing altitude. The succeeding groups will close with the lead group as quickly as possible to regain the defensive combat wing formation. The following groups need not necessarily pass exactly over the rally point in regaining wing formation. In the meanwhile, the marauders take off to fulfill their part in the day's operation. They bomb the aerodrome at Woensdrecht, one of the most important of the enemy's fighter bases. This blow by the medium bombers is timed so as to provide the maximum interference with the enemy's capacity to intercept our withdrawing heavy bombers. Last off are the fighters. Their great speed will enable them to reach the Leeuwarden district in a short time, sweep the area clear of enemy fighters, then give the heavy bombers withdrawal support from the enemy coast home. At the fields, it's getting on towards the most nervous of all times, the estimated time of return. Everyone who stays behind sweats out this period at the end of each mission. Here at the control tower, at the dispersal areas, at the Red Cross, at the Officers' Club, everywhere on the field, the one thing paramount in everyone's mind is that the group is due back. "18 went out to attack the target. How many have returned?" 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 15, 16. "17, 18. 18 dispatched, 18 returned. 23 dispatched, 23 returned. However, there are other groups which weren't so fortunate. 18 dispatched, 17 returned. 20 dispatched, 19 returned. 20 dispatched, 14 returned. 19 dispatched, 18 returned. 20 dispatched, 10 returned. 18 dispatched, 8 returned. Flares dropped from aircraft signal the presence of wounded aboard. These airplanes are given priority in landing. The airmen are home, but their job isn't over yet. Before they can go to their billets for a well-earned rest, they must first undergo one of the most important phases of any mission, interrogation. It is highly important to question the crews at the first possible moment after the mission, while their impressions and memories are still fresh. Crews who have anything of immediate importance to report go at once to the hot newsroom.
Hello, boys. How are they?
Well, come along. I think about
Best bombing job we've ever done. Good, good. Somebody in trouble?
yeah, we saw a 1D-17 go down there just before it made landfall.
Where was that?
Well, that was at 5240 north.
5240, yes.
1 degree, 50 minutes east.
0150 east. Yes, and what time was it?
That was at 1524.
And was that a G-pick?
That was a G-pick, yes. And we had the radio operator get on the MFDF section. He sent in the coordinates of the fix.
Good.
And I had my radio operator turn on his IFF to emergency when we saw it go down.
Okay. And what happened?
Well, the ship went down, apparently under control, and saw it hit the water.
Yes, I was looking through the glasses, and I saw 2 dinghies come out, and 10 men apparently all okay. Good. And what altitude were you?
We were at 5,000 feet at the time.
Okay, anything else? No, settle up for a cup of coffee. It's waiting for you, boys. Thank you. Third Division, please.
P.R. Smitty, I got a B-17 crew down the dinghy.
Thanks, Bill. 16 group, please. First aircraft priority. Flight control, please. 16, bomb division here. We have a B-17 reported fixed at 52 degrees, 30 minutes north, 1 degree, 30 minutes east. That's right. He was seen to ditch, yes. He was seen to ditch at 15:24 hours by the reporting aircraft. 2 dinghies were seen to break out, and 10 men got into them. The reporting aircraft is at 5,000 feet. Yes, that position's an MF fix. Okay, 16. Thank you.
In one way or another, scores of our crews are saved by air-sea rescue from the English Channel and the North Sea, and returned to combat service. Aside from human values, a trained fortress crew is even more valuable than the plane they man, and the work of the air-sea rescue unit has been of enormous value to the 8th Air Force. The hungry crews are fed enough to hold them until they can be interrogated and get to their regular chow. These men are from the groups that went to Anklam.
What time did you go over the target?
At 11:43 hours. We went in at 12,000 feet.
Did you get your bombs on the target?
Yeah.
What about enemy fighter opposition?
Well, that's something we're considering not discussed. Really,
Well, let's get some of the details. Where did it begin, Paul?
They first jumped us at 10:30 there just off the Danish coast.
And how long did the attack continue?
They stayed with us to the target and until 13:27. Then at 13:45 we had another group attack that stayed until 14:05. Had a couple more attacks, and the last one was at 15:26 just off the Danish coast coming out.
And about how many enemy fighters did you see?
Well, I don't know how many might have been repeated, but I saw 60 or 70 myself.
I couldn't keep track of them, sir, but I counted about 65. I stopped trying to count when I got to 50, sir.
Well, do you think it'd be accurate to say then that your ship saw between 65 and 80 enemy aircraft?
Yeah, that's right.
What type of enemy aircraft did you encounter?
Well, from what I could see from the tail, they threw the book at us. FW-19s, ME-109s, 110s, 210s, Dornians, even Ju-87s and 88s.
I saw a couple of Focke-Wulf 189s, at least 2 Heinkel 111s. What positions did they attack from?
Oh, they came from all over the place.
The fighters are pressing home their attacks from 300 to 400 yards.
Would you characterize these attacks as determined?
Brother, you can say that again. No, I think those guys are really trying to shoot us down. I wouldn't be surprised.
How would you describe the enemy fighter tactics?
Well, I describe them as words.
If they usually attack in formation, queue up about 300 or 400 yards away, 12, 13 single-engine fighters, come barreling right through the formation.
How'd the twin-engine fighters react?
They stayed out to the side and above, just out of the range of our guns, and started cannons and rockets at us. Then they'd queue up and press home a regular fighter attack.
What caliber would you say the cannons were?
My guess would be 37 millimeters. What do you think, Adam?
What about the rockets?
We shot a lot of them. I didn't actually see any hit our formation, but they weren't doing us any good.
I saw one of them blow a wing off the 17 below and ahead of us. They started to spin in.
Any shoot?
No, sir, I didn't see any.
Where was this?
Over the target, right up to the target bottom.
Fellows notice any distinctive markings on enemy aircraft?
Yeah.
Oh, quite a few. There are a number of FW-190s, mostly yellow noses, some white noses.
No red nose.
No, I didn't see.
Boy, those yellow-nosed boys really come in close, don't they? Did you see that one come right on our left wing?
Yeah, I saw a 109 with black and white diagonal markings under the wings.
Black and white. I had white nose.
All right.
Yeah.
Getting back to those rockets, I believe that Jerry can reload his rocket guns from inside the ship.
Yeah.
That'd be my guess, too.
I saw at least 9 bursts from rocket guns on one ME-210.
9 bursts.
Talking about 210s, there was one that came in and shot a cluster. It looked like clay pigeons to me.
Say, those things look like baseballs to me.
Can you describe that more fully? How did they react?
Well, they didn't look like baseballs. It was more like streamlined and smoked all the way down, but they didn't explode.
Didn't explode, huh?
No.
What about planes? I knocked down 2. They were making attacks about 5 o'clock level.
Yeah, I saw them. One of them blew up in the air, and the other one went down in flames. The pilot of the second one bailed out. That was at 11:44. We were right over the IP.
Were any other guns firing at these planes? No, sir. These were my babies.
Any more?
Yes, sir. I got one destroyed and one probable. I knocked a 210 down right over the target. The plane exploded in the air. I got a burst at a 110, and it started down in flames. I couldn't see whether it went all the way down or not. We were under constant attack.
Bombing results and enemy fighter reaction are only one phase of the interrogation. The enemy's anti-aircraft defenses, their concentration and their accuracy are also matters of great interest to the interrogators. The group of the 2nd Division, which went to Danzig.
How would you describe the flak and route to the target?
From the coast of the target, it was meager and inaccurate height and deflection. Over the target, it was still meager, but pretty accurate height and deflection.
Is that how the rest of you fellows would describe it? What about on the way back?
Well, it was meager and inaccurate, except now when we crossed the coast. They took a box barrage that was pretty accurate as to height. In fact, it was good at the altitude, but the deflection was a little off. The first burst hit about 100 yards ahead of the lead plane. And we felt concussion of it, right?
We got a couple of flak holes in fuselage right around my gun position.
Any other battle damage?
A couple of flak holes in the nose. First 303 in the number 4 engine. Got an oil line.
What was your altitude when this box barrage almost caught you?
21,500 feet.
Did any of you notice anything unusual or peculiar about the flak bursts?
No, it looked like the same old black flak to me.
What's the 6-3 half-seater?
Also valuable to the interrogator is any intelligence that might be picked up by the crews en route to or from the target. Such observations may be completely incidental to the mission, but can prove to be of great value at another time when another target is being attacked. Let's find out what the force attacking Marienburg discovered on their way to and from the target.
This smoke screen at Dan, where did that emanate from?
Well, it looked like to me it was coming from off of floats and boats here with smudge spots on them, anchored just a little ways off the coast.
Yeah, Ernie, they were shooting it up from the ground, too, and they get up so high and burst and mushroom out.
Would you say it was effective?
Well, we didn't pass right over the city itself, so we couldn't say definitely, but it looked like to me it'd be pretty doggone effective.
Was it all great?
Yeah.
You see anything else?
Yeah, there's a new airport about 2 miles below Danzig there, south of Danzig.
What it look like?
Pretty large airport with grass runways and a lot of construction at the south end.
And I seen another one there at Puck.
seems like it's building runways and some buildings, new buildings like the part up the hangars.
Okay. Now, how about military installations? Did you see any of those?
Well, south of Takeoff in East Prussia, we saw some installations that might have been fortifications.
They were large rectangular buildings, red tops.
Yeah, there were 2 rows of 4.
4 buildings each?
Yes.
Good deal. Now, did you see anything else?
As soon as interrogation of the men is finished, the interrogation forms are checked and general statistics on the group's part in the attack are compiled.
All right, let's get going on this report.
Okay. B, number of aircraft dispatched.
20, which?
C, number of aircraft attacking the primary target.
20.
Hello, I want the A2 duty desk. Hello, this is Norgan 492. Got a flash teletype report for you. You ready?
The organizational flow which we have observed throughout this picture has now begun to operate in reverse. Information obtained from the crews is evaluated in divisional critiques, conferences in which all responsible group and divisional officers carefully inspect the detailed record of the mission, discuss any failures that may have occurred, and plan to prevent their recurrence. After a particularly large or important operation, there will be a command critique, with the 8th Air Force Commanding General presiding. Here in the dark room, the strike photos of the targets brought back by the returning planes of the group are developed and printed with all possible speed, so that experts of Bomber Command can assess the damage done. Coming in from planes of every group participating in the various raids and interpreted and appraised by trained photo interpreters, these pictures will give Bomber Command an excellent idea as to exactly what parts of the various targets were hit and how severely. Here, as seen in these pictures taken the following day by photo reconnaissance planes, severe damage has been inflicted on all the major and most of the minor buildings of the Arado factory at Anklam. This is a strike photo showing how Danzig looked during the attack. Very extensive damage has been suffered in the harbor area. Here is an annotated PRU picture of Gdynia as it appeared after the attack. And near miss is seen on the liner Deutschland type. The transatlantic liner Stuttgart does not appear in this picture, although she was seen afire and in the hands of tugboats immediately after the attack, as these strike photos reveal. Aside from the Stuttgart, several ships in the South Basin have been sunk or damaged, including the liner Oceania. Shore engines are also heavily hit. At Marienburg, the PRU photo discloses that the damage was exceptionally severe, almost every building having been destroyed or seriously affected. General Arnold has characterized this attack as the greatest example of precision bombing on record. Other targets will be as thoroughly destroyed. Today, while the invasion armies are pressing the Battle of Europe, the Battle of Germany continues. Day by day, whenever weather permits, heavy bombers roar out over the heads of the advancing ground forces, blasting away systematically at vital industrial installations hundreds of miles to the rear of the enemy lines. Now, in contrast to earlier days of strategic bombing, when forts and liberators fought their way alone, fleets of long-range fighters, Mustangs, Thunderbolts, Lightnings, convoy the big bombers all the way to their targets, targets which may be anywhere in German-occupied Europe. The flood of supplies, so necessary to the survival of an army or a nation, synthetic rubber, steel, food, fuel, textiles, this flood is gradually being reduced to a trickle. And finally, even this thin, inadequate stream will die away. Then the German armies in the field and the German workers on the home front will have no food for their stomachs, no clothing for their bodies, no metals for their machines, and no fuel with which to run them. Then the Battle of Germany will be won, and with it, the Battle of Europe.